Hello, everyone, and thank you for joining us today. My name is Jessie Zaro, and we also have with us the lovely.
Kelly McGilligod. Hello, hello, everybody.
And we are excited to talk to you today about the 10 tips on making the migration to Koha a success. Just a little bit about Kelly and I, and then we'll jump right in. So, Kelly and I actually both started out as educators and former librarians before coming to Bywater Solutions. My background was in consortiums and law libraries before transitioning over here. And Kelly?
And my background is public libraries before transitioning over to Bywater. And I was a Koha librarian before I came to Bywater. So I have a special connection with Koha.
So, what we're going to do today is we are going to talk about things that will help you have a successful migration when you are coming from your ILS that you're currently on over to Koha. So, we're going to kick things off with just talking a little bit about what we do and our skilled migrations here at Bywater Solutions.
Yeah, absolutely, Jessie. I think probably the main point that we go through in the migration is just that data manipulation. And, we go through a lot of details talking about your data, but there's also other things. The data is actually key to most libraries. I want to make sure all my records and patrons come over, but we do a lot more, such as creation of your test server, transferring your data, Koha installation, the configuration of Koha, your OPAC customization, and those external connections such as SIP and LDAP. So we're really excited to talk to you about just some good tips to talk about and make it so it's going to be a super fun process. And this is just a very, very, very slim timeline we have where we've got some big goals. And a couple of these we'll talk about in this presentation. Of course, the one that kind of touches my heart is that kickoff call where we get a great introduction of the library, who they are, who we are, and be able to really talk about our goals and really, achieve that successful migration into Koha. Another thing we'll talk about is data migration, training, big time. That's a huge timeline goal, testing, and then going into having that go live date coming up. My little star at the top.
All right, so now we'll talk about a brief overview of what the data extraction is going to look about. So, the first thing that you want to think about is your bibliographic records. As Kelly mentioned, one of the first things we do is we have a kickoff call. In that kickoff call, our data migration specialists, our educator, our systems librarians, our support team, and members of the sales team will be there to talk about what this process is going to look like. And one of the biggest things is your data extraction. Now, this will happen twice during the migration process. The first time is going to be so we can analyze your data and then essentially map it so it will look at what it was in your legacy ILS to what it will look like in Koha. Some important tips here. Take notes, because that first extraction is going to be what you're going to do for the second extraction when you go live. So those bibliographic records, when you extract those out of your system and your items, that's again what we're going to map and say, okay, here's what the 846 fields were in your legacy ILS system. They're going to be mapped over to, let's say, the 952 in your Koha system. If you can extract those authority records, we can also bring those authority records in as well. Now let's talk a little bit about patrons. If you use patrons in your system, you can extract those borrowers, current checkouts. If you keep historic checkouts or reading history, that's another thing that we can ingest into the system. If your library does any type of fines, or you charge your patrons if they lose an item, those are all things, again, that can be extracted and ingested into Koha. If you use holds or reserves, again, those are things where we want to make sure that you can see that in the Koha system itself before you go live. Now, for those of you on the call today that may use a serials module or have subscription data, if you're using acquisitions and have vendor data in the system, or again, academics, and you're using course reserves, Those are some of the information that we can bring into the Koha system that during that first extraction of your data, we'll be able to use to map and then set up your test system for training, which again is so important. So you can view that information in the system.
And Jesse, 1 second. It's great to know that we've worked with a lot of ILS systems in the past. Our skilled data migration specialists know what they're looking for. You don't have to open a file. You could just extract it and send it along. We will do all the hard work. And part of that project is to analyze it and let you know if we are missing pieces or if there are things that we didn't get and we can do another extraction.
Absolutely. That's a great point. You don't have to worry about that. That's what our team is here to help with. Now, the organization of data is a key component. And what the data migration specialist will work on is organizing this data as we get ready to build your Koha system. So the first thing you want to think about are your patron categories. This is how you identify users in your system, whether you identify them as adults or residents, or maybe students or faculty. This is where you can do some cleanup. Maybe in your old ILS, you may have had certain categories based on the way that system works. You'll hear Kelly and I both say this a lot. Koha is going to work for your workflows. So forget about what you've done in the past. Think about how you want to do it in the future. Then, of course, we have item types. This may be referred to as material types in your ILS. This is what's driving circulation in Koha. So Koha is going to look at those material types or item types and those patron categories to define circulation for your users. So item types can be things like books or monographs, DVDs, serials, anything that you're using to define that information. Then you also have shelving locations and collection codes. Shelving locations, think about where does that item physically live in the library? Is it on the first floor or second floor? Is it in the adult section? Is it in the juvenile section? Is it in a children's room? This is where the user will be able to define and view where that item actually lives. Then you have your collection codes. Collection codes are what describe a collection. So let's say we have fiction or nonfiction or history or genealogy. These are all things that can be defined to help your user find exactly what they're looking for in the library.
Now we're going to talk about codes. Jesse talked about a data mapping sheet, and we're going to really look at all the data that we get, patron data, bibliographic data, and your item data. And we have some database codes that we need to work out. These codes will never be seen by your public. The great news is if you have really yucky codes in your old system, we can create new ones. And it's key to know that we're just going to keep them short and sweet so you don't have to remember something really long. 10 characters or less. No spaces or special characters, and they're usually all in caps. Again, nothing your patrons will ever see, nothing even a lot of your staff will even see. I love the fact that all codes within the system have the ability to create a description for both the staff and the OPAC. So again, the codes are not as necessary for your library workflows, but for the data itself. And it's just good to start thinking about that different aspect of the migration specifically for those codes. And this is where I get really excited. This is the opportunity to really revamp, change, do all the things you've thought about doing, but knew it was going to be harder to do in your current ILS. Make those changes as you migrate to Koha. If you find out that you can make one patron category versus 3, because how Koha uses the circulation rules based on patron category and item type, that would be fantastic. If you had the ability to use collections that you've never used before, you could go wild in figuring out where you wanted to use those collections. Graphic novels is always that big area where you're like, graphic novels are in the children, are in the adult, and in the nonfiction. If you create a collection for graphic novels, then a user could come in and just say, find me all the graphic novels. So it's great to start your brain how you can make your data more simple, more organized, and really focusing on your patron experience, how your patron's going to see it in Koha. And that's part of the testing. When you get that test site, you're going to be able to see what it looks like on the staff side and on the patron side. And then you can absolutely make those changes and say, you know what, we're going to actually make some really big decisions to make it easier for our patrons to find the material, search the material, and we're going to make this fantastic. So this is a really huge opportunity. And my most favorite part is seeing libraries change things, because now they can make it easier, and it's easier because somebody else is going to do all the changes for you.
That is such a great point, Kelly. And just this morning, we had one of our educators share such a sweet email about one of our libraries that is getting ready to migrate, and just how they were thinking about, outside the box. They're like, we don't have to do it that way anymore, because that's the way we've always done it. Let's do it this way, because this is what works for our library. And it's like so positive to hear that. And then just see those success stories when you get that empowerment behind them, where they're like, yeah, let's do this. Let's make those changes.
Absolutely. And the empowerment. Absolutely.
All right. So our next tip is essentially talking about training. So this is where we're going to either come on site or do a webinar training for you. So depending on the size of your library, for on-site, we'll come on there for 3 days. And we will work through the process of training you on how the system works and what works for your library. One thing that's unique about Bywater Solutions is we are really dedicated to the education of our open source products. So you'll find a ton of material online that talks about, how this whole process works. And so when we come there for on-site training, or if you're doing via webinar, we go through the process of the user experience. So, the circulation, the user's view of the Koha OPAC, what it looks like when you're checking something out, and we actually do hands-on. So you're following along. You think about a patron walks up to a desk and they say, oh, I lost that item. I left it on the airplane. It's never coming back. Who's going to say that these days? Who's traveling? But, wherever they left it, it's gone. We go through those real life scenarios in training, so how to mark an item lost. Or, you think about somebody calls on the phone and they want to have, something changed. We go through all of those processes in the system, withdrawing an item, understanding how reports work, because we want you to feel comfortable. Remember, we have all that data from your extraction on your Koha test system. So now we're actually training with your data, with your patrons, so you can see it live. All of those policy calls that we were having in the beginning are leading up to having your system set up for success. So now we know what your circulation rules are. We know what preferences your patron categories have. We know how you catalog. If you use serials, we know how you set up subscriptions. So all of that data is ready in your test system. You can make tweaks while we're there on site, and adjust things to make sure it works for your library. Now, if we're there doing webinar trainings, we do those on Zoom. We're giving you that same experience where we're working together, you're playing in the system and understanding how it truly works. Another advantage to that, you can record those and then go back at any time and watch those recordings for your users.
It's absolutely great that so many people are started to use Zoom in early 2020. It's actually more of a simpler process for a lot of libraries to jump on a Zoom and go through a training, because they've got used to it and feel really comfortable with that product now. And I guess, Jesse, we could say my pandemic puppy ate the book. Probably a new one versus left it on a plane.
That is a good one, Kelly. So all of that training that we were just on site or via webinar with you leads up to testing. So after your educator completes that training, the next thing you're going to do is testing. And we will say this time and time again, 15 minutes a day. That's the key. If you can spend 15 minutes a day testing your Koha system leading up to your go live, you will get familiarity. You'll understand your data, how it works in Koha. Again, this is where we encourage you to think about those day-to-day activities that you're doing. I always say, I go into my current ILS, I delete an item, or maybe I add a non-public note, something for the staff side, go do that in Koha then. That way you're doing something where you know how it works in your current ILS, but then you can go over and test it, see how it looks in Koha. And that's so important. In that testing phase, you want to make sure that you do your workflows in Koha so you really understand how it works. 15 minutes a day. I'll say it probably one more time before we switch that slide. That is really the key to success. Kelly and I have probably collectively done more than 200 trainings, and where we see complete success is where our libraries spend time testing the system. You get comfortable with it. And of course, that other key component is communication. While you're testing, if you see something that doesn't look right, whether it's your subscription fields that are not displaying properly, or maybe there's a non-public note that is displaying in the public note, these are the times where you want to make those changes. Your library decides to start using the claims return feature and you want to turn it on. These are the times when you want to start communicating with the Bywater Solutions team, both your data migration specialist and your educator, to make sure that everything is set for that go live time.
During those trainings where a staff member would pull up a patron account and make sure those notes, those valuable circulation notes, staff notes, are found on those patron accounts that we know, or a very popular book, and making sure all that information is displaying correctly. The testing is the most valuable thing you can do. Resources. Jesse touched upon this to say that education is one of our key components of Bywater Solutions, is making sure the user gets the information and is able to find the information. We're going to start off, we have the Koha online manual that is available online. It's also linked right from your staff interface. So you're able to, if you're in the reports module and you don't know what to do next, you can click that manual and it will bring you right to the report section and walk you through some steps with screenshots. I love the manual. I still find things in the manual I didn't know were there. We provide a lot of training resources. I kind of feel like we probably provide too many training resources in the beginning because there's a lot of information that we want you to know. The definition of item types, shelving locations, and collection codes. We have a tutorial video on that. We also have example libraries that how they're using these. So if you've never had the opportunity to use a shelving location, we have examples, which are great. We also have tutorial videos. We're making those short and quick. So you can find a tutorial video on like how to check something in, how to check something out. So it's just a quick reminder, because as Jesse talked about training, you're in there for 3 days, but if you're not testing, or if you forgot what to do, you can go back to a training tutorial video to help you and remind you of those steps. So those are really fantastic. And we create a lot of those by module. So if you're a cataloger, there is a fast add and how to edit a bib record. And finally, Bywater Solutions website has more information, where we're at, if we're having summits, if we're at a conference, things like that, where you can touch base with us. We love to see all the partners and hope to see them more coming in 2022. But again, we have a lot of resources and you can just chat with us in our chat box. So remember that your resources are always there. But most importantly, communication. I say we're always here. How are we always here? You can email us. You can send us a ticket where we talk about the ticketing system, how our questions and issues are tracked. So all Bywater staff can access that information and assist you during any questions, issues, or concerns that you have. You can call us. We are on the East Coast and the West Coast and everything in between. So there's always somebody there to help you with that phone call, as well as email and just being able to go, as I said, on the chat. We also have a Slack channel. So our partners are super active in our Bywater Slack channel, where I've seen current partners say, hey, how do I do this? And other people are jumping in and helping. So we're just really making sure you have the support
which again is the key component of that migration with us, is we want to support you through this process. We want to make it as easy and seamless as it can be.
Kelly, that's such a great point. We are a support company. And that's what I think makes us a little bit different than some of the other vendors out there. When you call on the phone, you talk to one of our staff members. You submit a ticket, one of us actually responds back. It's not an automated response. So you're getting personalized communication for you and your team during this migration and post go live. So that communication doesn't stop after you go live. We're still there to talk on the phone and answer a question. Maybe a policy is changing or you're going fine free, whatever it is. We are here for you to make sure that no matter what that question is, we can get you to a successful place with the ILS. And of course, now number 10, and this is so near and dear to our heart, is community. You are now part of an open source community with Koha that has been thriving for more than 2 decades. Koha first started in 2000, and since then, the community has grown to millions of users worldwide. We support many users here in the US and in fact, some internationally as well. And, some of those key components that Kelly just talked about, like with Slack, you can talk to those libraries and see, how they're using different reports in their system, or maybe they want to integrate a chat widget, or maybe you're looking to get a new printer. Like, these are all ways that you can just jump out, talk to these community members, and these libraries are so excited to give back and help you. And it seriously warms my heart when we see people helping each other in the Slack channel or on the email listserv. And that is really the beauty of the open source community. Integrations, there are dozens and dozens and dozens of integrations with vendors and products to make your day-to-day workflows smooth. So whether you're integrating a self-checkout or a discovery layer or one of your e-content providers, Koha can work with those to make sure that there is a smooth transition through all of the integrations with those outside vendors. Koha has open APIs. We can connect via SIP or NSIP, and there's no extra charge for those integrations. So keep that in mind during your implementation and when you're getting ready to make the decision to move to another ILS. We do not charge for any of those SIP connections to outside sources. And then, of course, developments. There's 2 major releases for Koha a year. So you can be a part of that feedback process where librarians are actually communicating in that open source community about, what they want to see in that next release, giving feedback about some of the changes that are in there. And that's what the developers are looking for. They want to hear from the librarians because this is a product built by librarians and continuous development by librarians. So that's such a crucial part of what makes Koha such a successful product. And then, of course, working together, sharing ideas with other users and making sure that, you can say, hey, this is what I did at my library, and, sharing that idea with another library. So it's pretty awesome to see that, working together. And then, of course, one of the newest features is the Koha to Koha ILL plugin, which allows you now to perform ILL functionality with other Koha libraries. So if you are in a state where there's quite a few Koha users, you can use that functionality to ILL between libraries. So pretty awesome to kind of see that grow. All right, so this was just a really quick overview of some of the top tips that we would suggest if you are considering migrating to Koha. The contact information is up here for your users to contact. Josh Barron is the Koha sales representative. So if you have any type of questions, Josh would love a time to talk with you and answer those questions and even set up a time to do a little demo. If you're thinking about making the implementation, you can give him a ring and he would be happy to get a proposal or contract out to you to get that started.